Welcome back to Velshi and Ruhle. This morning, new calls to fight climate change. This time, they are headed by students from around the world. Students are leaving their classrooms and demanding lawmakers make policies to combat climate change. Organizers say although there are many other important pressing issues, climate change directly affects them and future generations to come.
Without a livable planet, all of those issues will be obsolete. First, we need a planet that we can live on and thrive on.
This morning at the United Nations, my friends and I faced our world leaders, demonstrating to them that they urgently act on climate change. But they are still not listening. Instead, our world leaders are the ones acting like children. They are the ones having tantrums, arguing with each other, and refusing to take responsibility for their actions while the planet burns.
Scientists, not politicians, scientists and researchers continue to provide data explaining how climate change is affecting the Earth's atmosphere. And unless we make major changes to stop global warming, the consequences could be irreversible. In 2017, the National Climate Data Center recorded the average global temperature across the world at 0.84 degrees Celsius, making it the third warmest year on record. Officials say global temperature has not been cooler since 1976. And please listen to this. From 1900 to 1980, a new temperature record was set on every 13 and a half years on average. However, since 1981, a new record has been set every 3 years. Last month, lawmakers introduced new legislation called the Green New Deal. It is important to note Congress has not passed a new bill on climate change in nearly 10 years. The Green New Deal calls to cut global emissions by 60% and upgrade buildings to ensure maximum energy efficiency. The deal also proposes meeting 100% of U.S. power demand through clean, renewable, and zero-emissions energy sources. It also pushes to implement smart grids for affordable access to electricity.
And there is nothing wrong with those goals. We're just going to be really clear on this.
Those goals.
There's nothing wrong with those goals. It is not a weirdly liberal thing to want zero emissions, to want to reduce your climate, your carbon dioxide out. Like, this is nothing about that.
But hold
weird.
on. If you don't support the specifics of this Green New Deal, doesn't mean you don't have these goals. Those are two different things.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this a little more.
Climate and weather, we always have to remind you,
two different things
are not the same.
Carbon and carbon dioxide are also two different things, because the president tweeted about that the other day. All right, David Wallace-Wells is the deputy editor of New York Magazine, and he is an author of a book that you got to just read it. Everybody's got to read this. This is the issue of our time. It's called The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming. David, I think we've just got to move this conversation into a place that says if you don't like what the Green New Deal is or what it costs, or you don't understand the math on it, that's all good. Propose something else, debate it, do whatever you have to do, but don't deny the fact that those goals are goals we should share.
That's Mike Bloomberg. That is what Mike Bloomberg said.
Roughly speaking, we want the same stuff that is articulated there. I don't know how this has become the worst thing in the world for some people.
Yeah, I would say the legislation is probably most exciting because it really emphasizes the findings of the UN and exactly what the UN says we need to do. There are some indications about how we would get to those goals in the legislation, which is really more a position paper than a proper bill. But mostly it's a signal of intention and ambition, and those ambitions are exactly in line with what all of the world scientists say we need to do.
But America has not been in that place. And under Donald Trump, we have withdrawn from even stating that those are shared ambitions.
Yes, and he's telling you that you're not going to have a cow or be able to eat ice cream going forward. So traditionalists are worried that this is a completely radical idea.
Well, there's nothing in the bill that mentions those things at the moment. There's some, backstory about an FAQ that was probably written too early or published too early that was also written too jokingly that hit some of those points. But the main features of that bill are that we need to do exactly what the UN says we need to do: cut emissions by at least 45% by 2030. And when you look at the climate strike that you featured, all of the kids around the world out in the streets, it's sort of hard to argue with their moral clarity of their vision. It's really a lot, actually, like your earlier segment, it's a lot like the kids from Parkland.
Correct.
Speaking about the gun issue. When you see kids doing it, you realize as much as this has been processed through partisan politics, there is such clear moral urgency on both points.
Except It's the first thing Mitch McConnell talks about, jokes about straight out of the gate. He loves time to talk Green New Deal, attacking it. So to say that we all have to stop because these are young people begging for us to focus, we're not. A lot of people in major power positions are mocking it.
The powerful have not yet entirely come around, but the polling is actually really astonishing. 73% of Americans believe global warming is happening. 70% of us are concerned about it. Those numbers are up 15% since 2015. They're up 8% since March. So the movement in the public is actually quite fast. It hasn't yet transformed our politics entirely, but the fact that we're seeing a Green New Deal at all is amazing. 5 years ago, cap and trade was considered too radical for the Democratic Party, and now we're in an entirely different place. Hopefully we'll continue down that path, and the Republican intransigence will fall away. But I would also say the Republicans are an issue for American climate legislation, but they're an outlier around the world. There's not a party anywhere else in the world that is captive to denial.
Not even conservative parties.
No.
I mean, this is not a weirdly liberal conservative thing in the rest of the developed world.
You know, it's very funny that you bring that up. When we were in Davos and I was asking that question to people who are deeply focused on climate change, they weren't that concerned with President Trump pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord. They said, he can do that. The rest of the world, we got this. And they said even corporate America is on board.
I mean, America is only responsible for 15% of global emissions, and that share is falling. The truth is that the future of the planet's climate will be written largely by China, a little bit by India, and somewhat by sub-Saharan Africa. The U.S. and the EU have a kind of moral obligation because of what we did historically with emissions to show that we can go green and still provide affluent, prosperous lives for our citizens. But in fact, the future climate of the planet will be determined by these other countries and what they do. And in a certain perverse way, I think Xi Jinping has been excited by Trump's evacuation of moral leadership on this issue. He sees an opportunity for China to play that role, and he's seizing it. They're not behaving great yet.
People weren't looking at China as the global moral leader, and now there's an opportunity.
Wild
so let me just ask you a question. 73% of Americans believe this or acknowledge it. 27% don't. That seems alarmingly high to me, but you actually brought up a point that why it's not alarmingly high to you.
Yeah, there are polls that show that 26% of Americans believe that aliens are living among us. So I think that denial is a weird feature of American life, and I wish those numbers were lower. But the truth is, our politics can overcome those kind of numbers quite easily. NASA does not have an issue with people who believe that aliens are here. Our climate policy shouldn't have an issue with this 27% of deniers. The bigger problem is that the 70% of Americans who are concerned about climate aren't concerned enough. The median American is not willing to pay $10 a month to address climate change. The average contribution they're willing to pay is $1 a month. So I think it's much more important to get those of us who are a bit concerned about climate much more concerned about climate rather than focusing on the deniers.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I agree with that. Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.